Welcome, or as we say in Morocco, marhaba bikum. My name is Juliet Sorensen, and I welcome all of you to the John F. Kennedy Library and Museum to commemorate 50 years of public service by the Peace Corps. My father, Ted Sorensen, was one of the early architects of this living legacy of President John F. Kennedy, and he was deeply proud of the small role that he played. John F. Kennedy articulated his vision for the Peace Corps during the presidential campaign of 1960, first at the University of Michigan, and later on the night of November 2nd in a campaign speech in which my dad had a hand on world peace in San Francisco, when the nominee Kennedy called for, quote, a Peace Corps of talented men and women willing and able to serve their country in developing nations around the globe. This proposal promptly entered the national agenda during President Kennedy's first State of the Union address on January 30th, 1961, when he again called for the formation of a national Peace Corps, enlisting the service of all those who have indicated their desire to contribute their skills, their efforts, and a part of their lives to help foreign lands meet their urgent needs for trained personnel. And then, 50 years ago, this week, President Kennedy signed the executive order which created the Peace Corps. My parents' belief in public service inspired me to become a Peace Corps volunteer in the maternal and child health sector in Morocco, where I served between 1995 and 1997. As many of you in this room might agree, it was indeed the toughest job I ever loved. This afternoon, we are here to honor the Kennedy Service Award winners for their hard work and sacrifice and excellent service. In addition, we are here to celebrate Peace Corps' beginnings with the volunteers in the first group of Peace Corps volunteers who served in Ghana, in West Africa, and to celebrate the sending off of the next generation of Peace Corps volunteers. Of course, there is no better place for us to remember the first 50 years of Peace Corps and inspire the next generation of PCVs than this special place, the John F. Kennedy Library and Museum. Most unfortunately, the director of the Kennedy Library and Museum, Tom Putnam, could not join us today as planned due to a family illness. So in his place, I'm happy to introduce Aaron Moan Marquez, the director of the New England Regional Peace Corps Office.
I am delighted that so many of you have accepted our invitation to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Peace Corps in this beautiful space, which bears the name of our founder, John F. Kennedy. Today, we mark 5 decades of the Peace Corps and its legacy of service at home and abroad. The Peace Corps began with a challenge and a promise. The challenge was issued by a young presidential candidate, a United States Senator from this beautiful state of Massachusetts, to an audience of college students in Michigan. Today in particular, we will pay tribute to 6 individuals who have given outstanding service to the Peace Corps with John F. Kennedy Service Awards. This recognition is only given once every 5 years, and we are deeply honored that Ms. Caroline Kennedy is here to join our director, Aaron S. Williams, for the presentation of this ceremony. Every returned Peace Corps volunteer has a story to tell, and I'm no exception. I was a high school teacher in my hometown of Dover, New Hampshire, when I went to visit my sister Colleen in Burundi, East Africa, where she served as a volunteer. That visit to my sister's village changed the course of my entire life. In 1994, I was serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica, working with homeless youth and children. Later, the Peace Corps took me to Paraguay, Ecuador, and the Dominican Republic, where my horizons expanded immeasurably. The love of service that I learned as a volunteer through the Peace Corps later took me to Liberia, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Indonesia, where I was able to use the skills I attained as a volunteer. I can't visualize my life without the Peace Corps. But my story is not unique. It's not unique in this room. Director Williams served as a volunteer in the Dominican Republic. 4 members of our Ghana 1, the first Peace Corps group to leave for overseas service in 1961, are also here with us today. We also have with us a number of host country nationals who welcomed Peace Corps volunteers into their villages and stood by them through their service, teaching them all there was to know about their country and their culture. During the past 5 decades, each member of our Peace Corps family has contributed to the success of this agency. Volunteers still dig wells, just as they did in 1961. But today, they also mentor business owners. As the world changes and the needs of people in our host countries change, the work of Peace Corps changes with it. But our mission remains the same, and that simple idea of sending American men and women overseas to live, work, and become part of a community has become crucial to the understanding of this world. We all share a common humanity, and the Peace Corps enriches both the lives of the peoples we serve and the people who serve them. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Erin, for your service to the Peace Corps. Many people in the room here today were drawn to public service and the Peace Corps by the words of President Kennedy 5 decades ago. One of these was a young man from the south side of Chicago who was the first person in his family to finish college and was expected to go get a good job. Instead, he joined the Peace Corps. Please join me in welcoming the director of the United States Peace Corps and fellow returned Peace Corps volunteer from the Dominican Republic, Aaron S. Williams.
Thank you, Erin and Juliet, for that warm introduction. It's wonderful to be here at the Kennedy Library today. This library, of course, embodies President Kennedy's memory and the ideals for which he stood. I can't imagine a more fitting location to honor the Peace Corps than being here today. I want to also say a special thank you to Caroline Kennedy and members of the Shriver family for being here today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us at this celebration. While it's an honor to be here today, it's even more of an honor to recognize 6 individuals who have gone above and beyond the cause of service, both at home and abroad. Each recipient of the Kennedy Service Awards is part of a legacy of public service that was ignited by President Kennedy 50 years ago. And that vision continues today in each of the individuals who we're going to recognize. The Kennedy Service Awards are a chance to remind us of the exemplary contributions Peace Corps volunteers, staff, and returned volunteers make every day in our country. The Peace Corps is a family. And in this family, President Kennedy and Sergeant Shriver are our founding fathers. Their vision endures in the 200,000 Peace Corps volunteers and countless Peace Corps staff who have served around the world. As you all know, Sergeant Shriver passed away this year. Sarge was more than just our founder, champion, and friend. He made us believe anything was possible. He personified generosity and grace, and he radiated optimism and joy. We also recently lost another important member of our Peace Corps family, Ted Sorensen. Ted Sorensen was a champion of public service, and he wrote many of the words that President Kennedy used to inspire generations of Americans to serve. Together with President Kennedy, Sarge, and Sorensen helped transform a noble idea of service into a concrete solution. And along the way, they lifted millions and millions of lives. Sergeant Shriver also helped us open our eyes to the secret that volunteers share. The more you give, the more you get. Compassion and caring are among those precious resources that grow when shared. To paraphrase something that Henry David Thoreau once said, goodness is the only investment that never, never fails. That may sound sentimental, and given its origins, it might be tempting to see the Peace Corps as a vestige of 1960s idealism. But I believe it's much more than that. The Peace Corps is an enduring idea, as timeless as the simple human instinct to lend a hand, and as American as our core values. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised by the way it was seized, the way it seized the public's imagination. The Peace Corps spoke to who we are and who we yearn to be. Many of you know the story how then Senator Kennedy was on the campaign when he arrived in Ann Arbor, 2 o'clock in the morning, 10,000 students there waiting to listen to him. He gave impromptu remarks to a crowd, challenging them to devote part of their lives to service abroad. The idea caught on. Sergeant Schreiber called it spontaneous combustion. Spontaneous combustion. Within a few weeks, the Michigan students had organized hundreds of supporters. By the time of the inauguration, President Kennedy's office had received tens of thousands of letters on the Peace Corps, more than on any other topic. Just think, the agency didn't even exist, yet young people were clamoring to serve. Americans were hungry for the kind of opportunity the Peace Corps promised, the chance to live among other people, to learn about new cultures, to contribute their skills to community development, and to forge lasting bonds with new friends. And the impulse that motivated thousands of Americans to answer President Kennedy's call to service is an impulse that burns in the hearts of men and women still across our country. I'm very proud that now, in our 50th year, there are many more Americans in the Peace Corps than any time in the past 40 years. That means there are more than 8,600 Americans serving today as Peace Corps volunteers in 77 countries. They represent all 50 states, including 272 people from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They range from recent college graduates to seasoned professionals in their 30s, their 40s, and their 50s. Our oldest volunteer is a health educator in Morocco. Her name is Muriel. She's 86 years old. 86 years old. She has 2 great-grandchildren, and she Skypes, and she has her own blog. She's way ahead of me. As the world grows smaller, as our connections grow stronger, as our destinies grow more intertwined, I believe the Peace Corps' mission remains as relevant as it was a half a century ago. The inequities that existed in the 1960s still menace most of the globe. Poverty, disease, illiteracy, and hunger, often exacerbated now by climate change and by the fight against HIV/AIDS. And the United States is still, in some places, poorly understood in some parts of the world. And just as parts of the world still seem foreign, even frightening to some of us here at home. At the same time, as President Obama has said, we're privileged to live in an age when more than ever, as he says, the interests of nations and people are shared. We have tremendous new tools to use and opportunities to seize as we strive to make the 21st century an era of peace and progress. Village by village, volunteer by volunteer, the Peace Corps helps us strengthen ties of friendship, hope, and trust. I've seen it in action as I've visited hundreds of volunteers around the world and watched them empower women through microenterprise development in Thailand, help eradicate malaria in Senegal, teach computer technology to high school students in the Dominican Republic, and plant thousands of trees and reforestation programs in Ghana, and so many, many more worthwhile endeavors. As so many of you in this room know, there's no single volunteer experience, but volunteers do share a singular mission, a common desire to make a difference and to make the world a better place. And for me, and I suspect for many of you, serving in the Peace Corps changed the trajectory of our lives. It was a transformative experience. But that's not all. 200,000 volunteers in 139 countries later, the Peace Corps has changed the trajectory of America's story as well. As President Kennedy predicted, for most volunteers, the Peace Corps became just the first unforgettable chapter in a lifetime of service. Let me just close by observing something, and I'm sure many of you have observed this. You go to any conference of international development, any public service summit, any U.S. embassy, any gathering of civic-minded leaders. You know what you find there? You find, and you might even be amazed by finding, the large number of people who are returned Peace Corps volunteers. Creative, talented men and women who were profoundly impacted by the communities they served and who were profoundly affected by the toughest job they ever loved, and who remain profoundly committed to giving back. Through its compassion and devotion, the Peace Corps family has strengthened the American family. And 50 years after our founding, as we honor the extraordinary work of this year's Kennedy Service Award recipients, we are proud to keep passing the torch to the next generation of Peace Corps volunteers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Williams, for your words and for your long service to the Peace Corps as a Peace Corps volunteer, a regional recruiter in our shared hometown of Chicago, a National Peace Corps Association board member, and now as director. President Kennedy announced in his inaugural address that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. That new generation was represented in Ghana in 1961 with the arrival of the first ever group of Peace Corps volunteers, and we are proud today to have 3 members of that original Ghana 1 group with us to pass the torch to the newest members of our Peace Corps family. After President Kennedy's death, Peace Corps volunteers in some countries around the world were referred to as Kennedy's children, and these Ghana volunteers represent the first generation of Kennedy's children around the world. And so it is my honor to introduce Newell Flather, Valerie Staines, and Meryl Menon from Ghana 1. And now, Ghana pioneers, let me introduce you to the next generation of Peace Corps volunteers. Steve LaFrance, invitee to Mexico. Lauren Lynch, invitee to Panama. Sharon Forsbauer and Casey McDermott, invitees to Senegal. These Ghana 1 volunteers will perform a traditional Ghanaian kente cloth ritual, passing the torch to these invitees. The kente cloth is a symbol of traditions, respect, and new journeys. Thank you to Norma McAdie-Lennon from Ghana for providing us with this beautiful textile. As for Steve, Sharon, Casey, and Lauren, bon voyage and buen viaje. The spirit of President Kennedy and his legacy live on in his daughter. My father wrote in his memoir that Caroline is the keeper of the family flame, an eloquent spokesperson for all her father represented. We are honored today to welcome Caroline Kennedy.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming to the Kennedy Library to have this special ceremony. I know that Peace Corps volunteers are at home around the world, but we hope that you will always consider the Kennedy Library one of your homes, and we're very honored to have here an archive of returned Peace Corps volunteer stories, and we hope that everybody here will remember us and send us your stories as well as you go out or as you think to write them down for your own friends and family. On behalf of my family, I want to welcome all of you here and thank you for having this ceremony here. Today we mark not just the anniversary of the Peace Corps, but the endurance of an ideal. All my life, people have told me that my father changed their lives. They tell me that they decided to run for public office, to join the Peace Corps, to serve in outer space or in their communities, because for the first time they felt that someone asked them to give back to this country that has given us all so much. And for me, that's his most enduring legacy. He redefined what it means to be an American and enriched America's idea of itself. He inspired a generation that transformed America, and it was so moving to see those 3 Ghana volunteers here. And he passed that inspiration on to their children and grandchildren. 50 years ago, just a few weeks after his inaugural address, called Americans to serve their country, my father brought those words to life in the Peace Corps. And since then, more than 200,000 volunteers have continued that work and made that inspiration a reality in every corner of the globe. Every person in this room can take great pride in having played a part in that extraordinary work for peace. And each volunteer touches so many more lives throughout their lives, in their countries of service, and in their careers that follow. We are each leaders and followers in our lives, learning from others and passing on what we know. The Peace Corps has given those gifts to countless millions of people through countless small acts of kindness, intelligence, compassion, and knowledge. Today, when too many young people feel disconnected from public life, when our political dialogue is too divisive and our world too violent, I hope my father's vision and your work will remind all Americans that public service is a noble endeavor and that we each have a responsibility to make this world a better, more peaceful place. Thank you so much.
What an honor to have been part of that. And what an honor now to be part of the John F. Kennedy Service Award ceremony. Established 5 years ago, the John F. Kennedy Service Awards are given once every 5 years to 2 current Peace Corps volunteers, 2 returned Peace Corps volunteers, and 2 Peace Corps staff members. At a gathering to commemorate the 35th anniversary of the Peace Corps 15 years ago, my father said that the Peace Corps' real history lies not in the story of its birth, but in the story of its life, not in the archives of the White House or Capitol Hill or even the Kennedy Library, but in the deeds of its volunteers, in their fulfillment of President Kennedy's original mandate. And so today, we compare the hopes of the original dreamer with the experiences of those who are living out the dream today. The following 6 recipients best exemplify the Peace Corps in furthering its mission and the 3 goals. We honor their hard work, their sacrifice, and their outstanding service to the Peace Corps, both in the United States and abroad. Here to present the awards, please welcome once again Caroline Kennedy and Director Aaron S. Williams. Our first recipient, a Connecticut native and former U.S. Marine Corps helicopter pilot, began his Peace Corps service in Mexico in October of 2007. He spent 2 years in rural Veracruz, using his business management background to help companies compete and adopt sustainable forestry practices. He extended his service to become a volunteer leader of the Peace Corps' only technology transfer program, while also developing training programs for new volunteers. He is currently a special advisor to the Director of Technology at one of Mexico's national laboratories. Not only that, this recipient has traveled throughout the United States to discuss his experiences in Mexico, educating Americans on the missions, efforts, and successes of the Peace Corps. When asked by a colleague how a former Marine becomes a Peace Corps volunteer, this award recipient said, "A person joins the Marines and the Peace Corps for the same reason, the opportunity to make a difference." Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first recipient, currently serving in Mexico, Robert Ferguson. Our second recipient, a San Diego, California native, is currently serving in Romania as a fourth-year Peace Corps volunteer leader. As a community economic development volunteer affiliated with Habitat for Humanity in Romania, he has worked on capacity building, including helping to plan a local event where 500 volunteers built 10 homes in 1 month, makes my head spin, in an impoverished neighborhood. This project earned the community of Oradea, Romania, the title of National Capital of Volunteerism. Meanwhile, Habitat for Humanity International recently honored this recipient with its Volunteering with Excellence Award, given to just 3 volunteers annually. This volunteer epitomizes the spirit of Peace Corps' 3 goals through his work and proven track record for impact, promotion, and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please congratulate our second Peace Corps volunteer recipient, Chris Fontanesi. Our next category is the Peace Corps staff category. Our first recipient began her 4-decade-long career with the Peace Corps in 1968 as a language teacher in Guatemala. Since that time, she has worked with no fewer than 16 different Guatemala country directors, persevering through a massive earthquake and years of civil unrest. She has served in a variety of roles in Peace Corps Guatemala, including traveling throughout the region to provide administrative technical assistance to other posts. In 1971, she became the executive officer for Peace Corps Guatemala, a position she held for no less than 30 years until a short-lived attempt at retirement in 2001. By 2002, she missed her work with Peace Corps and returned as a roving expert consultant in the Inter-American and Pacific region. This award recipient helped to open posts in Mexico and Peru and has traveled to over 26 posts in her new capacity to provide technical advice. In 2006, she started her current assignment as the lead facilitator for administrative track of overseas staff training. As a teacher and mentor, she has touched the entire Peace Corps community. As a Guatemalan national, she has shared her country and language and culture with countless Peace Corps volunteers and staff. Please welcome and congratulate Francis Asturias. Our second Peace Corps Staff Award recipient comes from none other than my own country of service, Morocco. He left his position as the head of the Rural Water and Sanitation Unit in Morocco's Ministry of Public Health in 1992 to join the staff of Peace Corps Morocco. Since then, he has coordinated the Peace Corps Health Program in Morocco and currently works as program manager of the health sector and as HIV/AIDS Initiative Coordinator. This award recipient was instrumental in developing the Maternal and Child Health Project in which I and many other volunteers served in rural Morocco, as well as the current Rural Community Health Project. In 2006, he initiated the cross-sector HIV/AIDS Task Force of Peace Corps Morocco and continues to help volunteers and staff integrate HIV/AIDS awareness and training into their activities. Returned Peace Corps volunteers who have worked with him note qualities to which I can personally attest and remember vividly: his patience, kindness, impressive work ethic, and dedication to preparing Peace Corps volunteers for the field. For all of these qualities, we are delighted, and it is my personal honor to recognize Mostafa Lamqaddam, Peace Corps Staff Morocco. And now we come to the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers category, our final category for the John F. Kennedy Awards. The first recipient hails from Defuniak Springs, Florida. She has served as a Peace Corps volunteer not once but twice. First in Sierra Leone from 1968 to 1969, a country in which volunteers have recently returned. And again in Jamaica from 1984 to 1987. She has spent much of her career with the Special Olympics, promoting self-esteem, social skills, physical fitness, and increased independence for people with intellectual disabilities. Following her service in Jamaica, this volunteer worked for Special Olympics in North Carolina. When she returned to the Peace Corps in the 1980s, at the personal request of Sergeant Shriver, she became the first volunteer to launch a Special Olympics-based service effort in Jamaica. She led efforts to establish Special Olympics programs in Jamaica until the organization then hired her to establish new Special Olympics programs throughout the Caribbean and in Africa. She has since laid the groundwork for 43 new programs that serve more than 100,000 Special Olympics athletes. According to this recipient, Peace Corps and the Special Olympics are very similar. Both work with volunteers in countries throughout the world, promoting hope, change, and fulfillment to everyone they touch. Ladies and gentlemen, please congratulate Kathryn Davies Clark. Our final recipient of the John F. Kennedy Service Awards is presented today to a former U.S. Marine, sports enthusiast, and founder of a nonprofit agency. He began his Peace Corps service in Venezuela in 1962. Assigned to a barrio in Caracas, this Chicago native taught baseball, basketball, and other sports at the YMCA. He was later assigned to a fishing village where he continued his sports programs and formed lifelong relationships with Venezuelans. In 2002, then retired, he met former Chicago White Sox shortstop, you can tell I'm a Cubs fan, Chico Carrasquel, and the pair together launched the Chico Carrasquel Foundation to help underprivileged children in Venezuela and the United States. Today, Los Chicos de Chico buses transport barrio youngsters to YMCA centers, museums, ball games, and historical places throughout Venezuela, while also providing scholarships, toy distributions, and musical training for poor children. Starting this summer, the organization will also begin taking American kids on domestic bus trips to visit museums and historical sites throughout our country. This award recipient insists that his accomplishments show nothing but his gratitude for being born in the USA, on a street called Greenwood, in a neighborhood called Kenwood, in a great city called Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe Carroll Jaycox. What a lineup, ladies and gentlemen, the 2011 John F. Kennedy Service Award winners.